It's Thursday, August 25th, 2025. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Granthermes. Today in the show, the big meeting in Alaska between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin set for tomorrow for another round of peace talks about the war in Ukraine. And it is a huge deal, which could mean the beginning of the end of the war in Ukraine. But there are also some really weird things happening around it, like why it's in Alaska in the first place and what that means to Russians. And then the on-again, off-again relationship that Trump and Putin seem to have, and whether anything might actually happen in this meeting, especially with the eyes of the world watching. But first, make sure you're following or subscribe to the show, whatever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications if you're a watcher on YouTube. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack, where I've got brand new content up each week. And as always, share the show on social media. It's Mims News Pod. That's MIMS News Pod, all one word on every platform. I am at Granthermes on Twitter and Bluesky, and at Granthermes TV on everything else. All right, let's get to the show. We are heading into the final stretch of summer, and let's face it, you need some new sunglasses. Your old ones are scraped or scuffed, or maybe, like I did, you sat on them because you left them in the car, and it's time to replace them so you can finish out the summer in style. That's where Aquila comes in. Independently designed and handcrafted in LA, they offer timeless style, uncompromising quality, all without the inflated price tag. And their styles are unisex and look great. I really like their Essential line. It's a cool throwback look that really fits my day-to-day style. I can throw them on and know that they'll fit my fit. And you can feel good about wearing Aquila sunglasses too, whether it's the UV blocking sunglasses, the blue light clear lenses, or the prescription eyewear. It's all made from 50% recycled materials, including recycled lenses, eco-friendly plant-based plastics, and it's shipped to you in sustainable, plastic-free, biodegradable packaging. Plus, all Aquila frames come back with a 1-year warranty, just in case anything should happen to them. You just ship them back and they'll fix them up, or they'll get you some new ones. So right now, you can get an exclusive 10% off your next pair of Aquila glasses, their highest discount of the summer, when you use the code MIMS25 at checkout. That's MIMS25 on your entire order. Now, Make It Make Sense does get a cut of that, but, it's just another reason to go check them out. Protect your eyes, support the show. It's a win-win. So visit aquila.la, that's AKILA, and use the promo code MIMS25 at checkout. Aquila, unisex handmade sunglasses from LA. Independent style meets unbeatable prices. Elevate your look with modern eyewear concepts. All right, let's get on with the episode. So tomorrow, or Friday, when you're listening to this, Donald Trump is flying to Alaska for what's being called a listening session by the White House, but is really another attempt to start peace talks to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. And before I talk about the substance of these talks, it's really important to talk about the location. It's going to be held on a military base in Anchorage, Alaska, a 13,000-acre base just outside Alaska's largest city. It's also been home to other diplomatic visits in the past, though not from Putin. The last time Putin was on U.S. soil, according to the U.S. Office of the Historian, was in 2015 when he was speaking at the UN and met with Obama. And that was also the last time a U.S. president met with him inside U.S. borders. And it was also in New York, maybe the most American of cities, at least to the rest of the world. Holding this meeting in Alaska is an odd choice. It's not neutral ground. I mean, it is from the standpoint that the U.S. isn't actively fighting in the war in Ukraine, but normally, neutral ground would be somewhere in Europe, which would also signal the side the U.S. is on. Trump could have also brought Putin to a place like Camp David, which George W. Bush did. W also, for what it's worth, had Putin on his private fishing boat up in Maine. But whatever. Or Trump could have met Putin at Mar-a-Lago, which Trump was rumored to have invited Putin to during his first term. But instead, it's Alaska. And now Trump, on his end of this meeting, could be picking a military base because it's part of an effort to be a show of force, a imposing sense of strength on Putin, who will get a look at the closest U.S. base to Russia. And that would be an uncharacteristically normal kind of what's called statecraft or diplomatic chess moving. But that is being overshadowed by quite a few other things. First, many Russians think Alaska is actually theirs. And I'm not joking about that. The Russian-born now soldier for Ukraine and founder of the European Resilience Initiative, Sergei Semleny, wrote on Twitter this week, "I was taught in geography class in the 1990s that Russia has never sold Alaska to the U.S., but leased it for 100 years, that the U.S. had later forged the contract and broken the original one, that Alaska is Russian. Now, the 100-year lease would have been up, according to that, in 1967, because it was 1867 when Lincoln's Secretary of State William Seward brokered a deal to buy Alaska from Russia. It's often called Seward's Folly as a joke because Alaska was and still is in a lot of places so desolate. But it also, in 1967, would have been just 8 years after Alaska formally became a state. There's also a belief among many Russians that the contract that the U.S. signed with Russia was somehow voided in the 1920s because of a claim that Russian Orthodox schools and churches were forced to close by the U.S. government after being told they could stay open, and then their leaders of those schools and churches were punished. None of that is true. And according to the University of Anchorage, the Russian community in that city and in the state remains vibrant and active. But that hasn't stopped Putin for the last several years from leaning into Alaskan Russian imagery, including using a photo of him for his birthday standing next to an Alaskan bear, recognizable to most Russians as the national animal, and the specific bear that Putin used was from the American Museum of Natural History in New York, making Putin look like he was leading this bear away, presumably back to Russia, and thus a sign of leading Alaska away from the U.S. and back to Russia. And there have also been billboards popping up around Russia that read, "Alaska is ours." And on Putin's official website, there are passages about how it was Russian settlers who first ventured into Alaska, claiming the territory, and then made their way as far south as California. And that's why there are Russian grapes in California vineyards. And if you look at how Putin talks about Ukraine and the rest of the former Soviet or Russian territory, he's making a lot of claims about heritage, that Russians were there first, which means the land is theirs. They have a right to it, obviously paying no attention to indigenous or first peoples in those places. But at least in a symbolic sense, Putin and many Russians think of Alaska as sort of this appendix of Russia. And following that logic, I guess maybe further south? I don't know. But the idea of Alaska being Russian was made worse this week by two odd statements from Trump. The first happened during a press conference on Monday when he said he was going to Russia to meet Putin.
And it's embarrassing for me to be up here. You know, I'm going to see Putin. I'm going to Russia on Friday. I don't like being up here talking about how unsafe and how dirty and
So obviously that's wrong, but also a little alarming. It was also during a press conference in which Trump seemed a little tired. It seemed like he rambled a lot and jumped from idea to idea in a very old man kind of a way, not his normal way. But the second odd statement was yesterday when Trump posted on Truth Social calling the city of St. Petersburg in Russia Leningrad, which it hasn't been named in almost 35 years. The name is a painful reminder for a lot of Russians about the oppressive Soviet era, but it's also an era that Putin wants to return to. The whole reason he invaded Ukraine in the first place was because he wants to return Russia to a modern version of the Soviet Union. And there is no way that Putin isn't going to read into that name change in this post from Trump as anything other than a signal of allyship from him. And I'm going to continue to talk about a lot of these small things as we go forward. Because in this meeting, yes, the location is a character, but let's talk about the actual characters and the substance as well here. Trump and Putin have a special sort of relationship. Trump talks tough about Putin when he's not around. But when he's on the phone with him or he meets him, he gets all weak in the knees. And I mean, Trump is easily flattered and responds to flattery well. And Putin knows that. So whenever Trump leaves a call with Putin, the immediate reaction from him is always this sort of fawning over him. And that's heightened when Trump is right next to Putin. Take in 2018 when they met in Helsinki for this one-on-one that's now infamous because in this meeting, Trump sided with Putin over his hand-picked head of the intelligence agencies about Russia interfering in the 2016 election.
All I can do is ask the question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be. I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today. And what he did is an incredible offer. He offered to have the people working on the case come and work with their investigators with respect to the 12 people. I think that's an incredible offer.
It was a staggering thing to hear an American president say then, and frankly, it is still a staggering piece of history to watch now. And that was also the same press conference, by the way, where Putin admitted to interfering on Trump's behalf in the 2016 election, which Putin knew at the time would ingratiate him to Trump, not open him up to a risk of criminal charges or even some kind of condemnation. But more than that, Putin is the kind of leader that Trump likes and wishes the office of the American presidency could be. And what I mean when I say that is that everything for Putin flows from his office in Russia. All the control and power is from Putin's office, and that's what Trump wants. And he's frankly working really hard to make that happen right now. I talked about that earlier this week on Tuesday and in the Make It Make Sense Substack post this week. But Trump is like that with a lot of other dictators as well. He was like that with Viktor Orban in Hungary, with the leaders of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, people who murder dissidents and fund terror groups. Trump is frequently very complimentary about the authoritarian leader in China, Xi Jinping, and famously sent love letters, in his words, back and forth with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. So Trump really can't help but try to be buddies with Putin when he's sitting right in front of him, and Putin knows that. And when it comes to the war, Trump has largely forced the U.S. out of supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russia, and his administration has been echoing that. Here's J.D. Vance talking about it last weekend.
And I certainly think that America, we're done with the funding of the Ukraine war business. We want to bring about a peaceful settlement to this thing. We want to stop the killing. But Americans, I think, are sick of continuing to send their money, their tax dollars to this particular conflict. But if the Europeans want to step up and actually buy the weapons from American producers, we're okay with that, but we're not going to fund it ourselves anymore.
What about Israel?
So this isn't new from J.D. Vance. We heard it during the campaign. We've heard it since he became vice president. But Vance here is essentially saying the U.S. wants out, which, like I said, has been the position of the administration for a while now, meaning Putin already has a leg up because he knows the U.S. isn't going to keep backing Ukraine and also doesn't want to and probably won't fight really hard in Ukraine's best interest during this meeting. And then Trump also put on the table that he'd be willing to agree to some kind of land swap or secession of Ukraine to Russia as a broker in this peace deal, which Ukraine definitely won't do without more fighting. But Trump said it while standing in front of the seal of the president in the White House briefing room, which carries weight.
There'll be some land swapping going on. I know that through Russia and through conversations with everybody. To the good, for the good of Ukraine. Good stuff, not bad stuff. Also, some bad stuff for both. So there's good and there's bad. But it's very complex because you have lines that are very uneven. And there'll be some swapping. There'll be some changes in land. And the word that they will use is, they make changes. We're going to change the lines.
So that's a huge deal and a signal to not just Russia, but Ukraine and Europe that they have even less support from Trump than they might have thought. And given the way that Trump has treated European allies since he's been in office this time around, which has been anywhere from cold to hostile when he's not getting exactly what he wants, it's not like Europe thought there was a lot of support there in the first place. But Trump is also becoming increasingly frustrated with Putin dragging out the war in Ukraine and kind of thumbing his nose at the U.S. for pushing peace talks. Remember, Trump promised to end this war on day one of his presidency and couldn't make it happen. And just yesterday, Trump said there would be consequences if Putin isn't serious about ending the war in this meeting on Friday.
Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
there will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences, yes.
So that sounds pretty tough. Again, Putin isn't in the room, and maybe Trump means it, but given the fact that he's become known for being soft on his trade and tariff deadlines in those negotiations with countries like China, Putin is probably likely going to try and call Trump's bluff on this. But also, just before that, Trump had recently undercut how severe those consequences could be because he said there is already another meeting being planned, and he appeared to not know the situation on the ground with the war in Ukraine.
President Zelensky, and then I'll call probably in that order the leaders. there's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first, because the first is I'm going to find out where we are and what we're doing.
To be clear, the president, any American president, not just this one, would get weekly, if not daily, briefings about the state of the war in Ukraine and would have a working knowledge of it, especially ahead of this meeting. He would not need to learn what's happening and where we're at from the authoritarian leader who started the war. But on Monday, Trump also said he might just walk away from the entire war itself.
There's just a little bit of water left. So I'm going to go and see the parameters. Now, I may leave and say, good luck, and that'll be the end. I may say this is not going to be settled. I mean, there are those that believe that Putin wanted all of Ukraine. I happen to be one of them, by the way. I think if it weren't for me, he would not be even talking to anybody else right now.
And it's here I would not blame you if you're feeling a little dizzy or that you've got some sort of whiplash about where Trump stands on the war in Ukraine. And it means from a negotiating standpoint that Trump isn't going into this meeting with the best foot forward. And it's also sending a ton of mixed messages to Ukraine and Europe. And as all this has been happening, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, who has a rocky relationship with Trump, did speak to him yesterday, so Wednesday, along with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. And the two said that Ukraine may be up for some sort of territory discussion, but there has to be a frontline immediate ceasefire. And then Zelensky told Trump not to believe Putin about wanting peace. Basically, don't fall for what Putin will sell you. The leaders of Britain, France, and Germany also put out a joint statement saying the same thing because remember, European nations are worried that if Ukraine falls, Putin might try to keep going. And that would mean entering Poland, a member of the EU, and NATO, our North Atlantic military defense group that includes the U.S. And, the last time a dictator rolled into Poland, it started a world war. So this meeting is really high stakes, even if Trump considers it to be just a listening session. Now, after the meeting in Alaska, Trump and the White House are saying that Trump is going to call Zelensky and European leaders, which, again, this is diplomacy. So the nitty-gritty of these decisions and how they happen matter. It matters that Trump isn't flying from Alaska to Europe or isn't having leaders come to the U.S. to meet with him right after this meeting because talking on the phone isn't the same amount of respect as flying to meet somebody or meeting them face to face. Now, Trump did say that if this meeting goes well, which he couldn't explain when he was asked several times what that actually means, but if this meeting goes well, he wants a second meeting to happen with Zelensky and Putin, and he wants it to happen soon. How soon is? We don't know. Where that could be, we don't know. And again, all of that matters, even if it seems trivial to wonder about the time and date of a future meeting. And I know that I've done a lot of talking about the small stuff here, the ifs and buts of this entire situation, but when it comes to these kinds of choreographed meetings, those matter. It's how diplomacy works. It's signals and signs and winks and nods, and when so much is on the line, the small things are huge. And for someone like Trump who doesn't sweat the small things, it sets a stage for this listening session to have the entire Western world on edge, and it's worth paying attention to what happens next. Okay, that is it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show on whatever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. If you're a watcher on YouTube, also leave a comment below. It really helps boost the show. And as always, sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack, where I've got a brand new article put up just yesterday about how Trump is using architecture and fine art to take pages out of the dictator's playbook. But to get access to that, it is $5 a month, and you get access to all sorts of other great bonus content. And if you don't want to do that, no sweat, I get it, but please share the show on social media. It's Mims Newspod, that's MIMS Newspod, all one word on every platform. I am at Granthermes on X and Bluesky, and at Granthermes TV on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Granthermes, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.